Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel for today's video. I wanted to talk to you about rumination, so let's jump in. When you have been in a relationship with the narcissist and you've been not just one cycle, although this can occur even just from one cycle because of the spelling, the witchcraft, and also the lies and the falsity, the fake love, the fake future faking. And when you are with somebody and they're lying to you and they're cheating on you, they're devising evil behind your back, and they are at least telling you they love you, right? You start to see some of these things. You have inklings of them, especially if you grew up in the narcissistic type household as a child, or at least some sort of narcissism was there that laid down some sort of foundation to where you had some of these grooming mechanisms placed into you that cause you to be susceptible to this spelling and to be susceptible to the grooming that now advances from what was placed in your childhood for the narcissist hierarchy of the person that raised you or was the caregiver to now being groomed for the narcissist love partner later. So what I'm saying is that there was things planted in you, groomed in you to take care of or to supply all the needs for the narcissist hierarchy caregiver, and now you're in the love partner situation later in life, and now you have also been groomed. That same mechanism was also, it may be hibernating. Maybe you have gotten about your business and you become very successful and you think everything is cool, you think you're healed up, but you had a couple of relationships that weren't so good and they were narcissistic. But then you've gotten away from those and you learned some things. You didn't completely wake up to what narcissism was, but you woke up to some of the details of what it looks like and how they move, because there is a pattern. We call them cycles. There's cycles and ways about them. We call them red flags. So you get away from these past, whatever you want to call them, karmic relationships or past relationships that really God will put into your life to wake you up to this original situation so that you can break this curse in your future situations and to leap out into your future curse broken so that you can have abundance and invest into yourself, love yourself. Those are some of the grooming mechanisms to keep you from loving yourself, because you're kind of groomed into humility, but that's really who you are. Because when you're born, the black sheep doesn't choose to become the black sheep. They are made out as the black sheep, but truly in their innateness, they were humble. In their innateness, in their childhood innateness, they were lovable. They were helpers and healers. They were people that didn't want to put hurt into people. We didn't want to invest hurt into an injury into people. And we wanted to treat people with equal scales, but we were kind of groomed to overtreat them, overplease them, because we really innately would have been balanced in, say, a regular family. But the black sheep never grows up in a regular family. So what would have been regular? If you were to grow up in a regular family, you would be, like I say, kind of like these lukewarm people that just kind of, they work and go to their career, and then when they have the weekends off, they may lounge on the couch and go to the mall. And that's their life. Before they know it, the time's ticking, and they never really accomplish anything spiritually. But they're kind of satisfied. They're full on 3D. And they're okay with that because there's no drive to do more spiritually. There's people that are going to come into this earth. You know, like I said, from the spirit realm, everything is birth first. And We are placed in strategic families and strategic places to start our lives. And it's all fair. But it's fair not based on where we, it's not fair based on where we are born, because that on a 3D will tell you that's never fair. But if you go back to before we were birthed to whatever, like God knows us before our parents do, because he knew Jeremiah, and he talked about this, and Paul talked about this in the Word. That, for instance, Jeremiah was called to be a prophet unto the nations before he was. God already had him ordained. He was called out before he was called in here. He was called out in the spirit realm before he was called into this 3D matrix that we live in today. Okay? So it didn't matter what somebody wanted to do or were going to claim over his life. He was still going to be a prophet unto the nations. Why? Because God already ordained him. He called him before he even created this earth. He knew him. And just like he knew him, he knew us. All of us. The evil ones, the good ones, the mediocre ones. But he gives us freedom to choose. And just like we have freedom to choose in this world, we have freedom to choose between right and wrong. We have freedom to choose who we want to be and who we're going to cultivate ourselves into. We're going to have freedom to choose our destiny, and we're going to have freedom to choose what we're going to give up on and what we're going to push through. How much heart do you have? With that, we have this situation to where there's the curse breaker. There's also the empath that grows up as a black sheep, and they don't break any curses. They're lovable people. But they also have to have the heart and the drive to break that curse and tend to expand like the sun, y'all, to become a star. That's why they call you a star seed, or a earth angel. There is something to that. That may be the world's version. But the Bible is the Word. Christ is the Word. He's the whole Word. That's why sometimes you'll see prequels of him in the Old Testament. He's King Melchizedek. A lot of people believe that was Jesus Christ in the Old Testament as a prequel to him, because he always has been. We always think that he was never around until Mary birthed him, and Joseph was his stepfather, right? Or his father that raised him, because he was birthed from the heavenlies. That's why I say that. The Immaculate Conception. But he also, I believe, was the burning bush. And he was also in the prequel. He was the burning bush because he had to kneel down. He was on holy ground. And you don't bow to an angelic host, but somebody was talking to him. And it wasn't coming from the sky, y'all. It was the glory of God in the physical form. And nobody's seen God the Father, so it had to be Christ. And there was one of the judges, I think it was Ehud, maybe? It was somebody, one of the judges that bowed down to the angelic host. That was supposedly the angelic host that met with him to give him that word of what he was going to do. How he was going to judge the enemy, because they hadn't had a king rise up yet, right? Which was Saul later. And then David took over. And then Solomon was his son that took over. That was the kingship status of the Israelites. But it started first with judges that God raised up. Because God didn't really want first a king over Israel, because he knew what it would lead to. It kind of can lead to some sort of a dictatorship and an abuse of power, because the enemy will sneak in, and then you will be oppressed by the king. And God wanted to be the king of his chosen people. But the people wanted a king because they wanted to look like all the other tribes and cultures in their reality. And they felt like if they didn't have a king, they wouldn't fit in. So they wanted to fit in. So God gave them a king, and he let them choose. And they chose Saul. He was a powerful looking man, but he ended up being corrupted by the enemy. So my point to all this, it has to do with your innate spirit. Before you were here, what I'm saying is you have free will here, because everything is up here. You can be locked in a cell, you can be locked in chains, but they can't take your free will up here. So everything is consents, covenants, and contracts. It's also about boundaries that you build around yourself and the company that you keep. And it's who you have your allegiance to, which should be Christ and God the Father and the Holy Ghost. But I'm getting to something. Also, what is true, you will find that even in the spiritual realm, we have free will. Now, you do till a point of judgment in the spirit realm, meaning for the angelic host, they had free will. The enemy came along or turned into the enemy through his lust and his pride, right? And his vanity, his jealousy, his greed, when he took a third of the host down. See, I don't believe they all fell. I don't believe that the enemy works insidiously, right? So you learn this from the narcissist. He works insidiously, meaning slowly, but it perpetuates throughout the whole crowd. It could be a crowd of people, it could be a country, it could be a nation, it could be a world. Well, picture heaven as the world. The enemy insidiously was able to put his message through to all of the heavenlies. But you know what the enemy always says, or the narcissist would always say? I'm going to tell you a secret, but don't tell anybody. Or they're going to lie by omission and manipulate, twist things. But at the end of the day, even through all those manipulations, twists, and lies, if your heart is right, you will find your way to righteousness. And if you don't, it's because not that you were manipulated, although that's true, but that your heart was never really with that allegiance. And so God the Almighty had, in my opinion, when this was happening, it's not like the enemy just rose up and a third of the hosts agreed to be with him and then they had a war and got destroyed and thrown down to earth like fire and lightning. And there was a Jeremiah's flood. And then they were locked in the waters. That's why in Genesis 1:2, there was darkness over the face of the deep of the waters. And everything was void. It's because the war had taken place between 1:1 and 1:2. Because God doesn't go from perfection to chaos to perfection. That's what the modern day church will tell you. That in Genesis 1:1, God created heavens and the earth. And then in 1:2, and the earth was without form or void. And there was darkness over the face of the deep of the waters. And then he said, let there be light. So the modern day church will tell you that the darkness over the face of the deep of the waters was God beginning to create from this jumbled mess. But that's not true, because God never goes from like an order, like in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, which means also the angelic hosts and everything there was that lived and breathed upon the earth angelically and in the heavens was all one nation, one world. The heavens and the earth were togetherness in one accord. And Satan, or Lucifer, was the head, the cherub that was head over the praise and worship in heaven. So he was at the throne of God. And you know how you have the orchestra, and the guy who waves his wand, right? Well, he was waving his wand, controlling all of the praise and worship. And the Almighty was behind him on his throne. And they would all bow down and praise the Lord and stop working all at one accord and worship the Lord. Well, I don't know what happened, but maybe he was supposed to bow down as well when that worship took place. Maybe he refused to one time and felt some of that worship coming at the Almighty, and it put jealousy in him. And he felt it and had to have it. Something happened. He was also the most beautiful created angelic host. And he was very talented. It would say that when he would breathe, it says in, I think it's Isaiah, that when he would breathe, there would be timbrels or drums and harp strings that were built into him and horns and things. That when he breathed, Lucifer, that music would come out. Amazing chords would be positioned in the heavenlies. He was just an amazing created being who was beautiful and very talented. But in his vanity, he got jealous of God and wanted to position himself above the Almighty. It didn't just happen to where he fell just in one night and a third of the host went with him. There had to be some sort of word of mouth, some sort of infection, some sort of leaven that was spread throughout the heavenlies in secret. You know, sometimes you can use witchcraft and you can bind people to you. You can cover up or cause an aura, a wall to where you could be there, but the person doesn't see you because they're using witchcraft. And you can maneuver around that person, take advantage of them and abuse them, and they will never know. But God wanted everybody to have free will. God knew it was happening, but Lucifer maybe didn't know that this witchcraft was being seen through. This is just my story of how I think maybe things happened. But what happened was he insidiously spread this message that he was going to take over heaven. He was going to be more amazing than the Almighty. Will you come with me? Well, a third of the hosts apparently decided. So 33 and a third percent. That would be a third of 100, right? And they decided that they were going to pledge allegiance to Lucifer, and they were going to go against the Almighty. Well, this attack took place at some point, and it was from heaven and on earth. And when it occurred, they got utterly destroyed. But that was when the angelic hosts got the right to express their free will. They chose to either stay with the Almighty, 66 and 66.6%, or go with the 33 and a third percent. Well, God threw them down like fire and lightning. And he had Jeremiah's flood occur, they call it, on the earth. If you read in Jeremiah, it was the first flood, and it destroyed the earth. And I believe that the fallen angels were the darkness that were locked into the waters in Genesis 1:2. Because God never creates, and then in 1:2 there's chaos, and he's going to work from chaos. In 1:1 he created the heaven and the earth, and everything was, and the angelic hosts made by fire. And they were just, everything was beautiful. Could have been billions of years, but when they fell, God destroyed the earth, and they were locked in the waters, in my opinion. And in 1:2, it's telling you of that. So it's called the gap theory. It could have been millions, billions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or could have been 50 years, who knows? But at some point, then God said, let there be light. And then he put a firmament over the earth. And I believe that when he unlocked them from the waters, in my opinion, the fallen angels, fallen hosts, that he had a firmament placed in the heavenlies first. It's a dome. It's called a rakia. It's made of molten metal. And if you think about it, glass is made by taking sand and taking the metals of the earth and lighting them with fire, and it will turn to glass. A rakia, which is an unbreakable rock of a dome, and it's glass. And above that is water, separates the waters above from the waters below on the earth here. So we are locked in a snow globe. And a lot of people will tell you that there's space out there. On the other side of this dome, there is water, y'all. That's why the sky is blue. And those stars in the heavenlies, they're in the water, in my humble opinion. And those planets that you see up there, they are called wandering stars if you go back into the historical narrative. Stars that were disobedient. That's why they look the way they do. And above that is the third heaven, the heavenlies. This is what occurred. And then when he unlocked them from the waters, they were free, but they were in this imprisoned world called Earth that he recreated for humanity. They can't get through the dome either. And it goes under the earth as well, so they're locked in here with us. And I do believe that they continue to come back to some degree in some sort of human form over and over until their final damnation, but they're locked in here with us. And that's why the world is the way it is. But he gave them free will, and you have free will. You were born with free will, but you were born, and that was determined before you ever entered this earth. That's why wherever you were placed and whatever you were going to do was already done, and the Almighty knew that. So he positioned you in a family, in a country, in a place with the right amount of finances that you were deserving of, to give you an equal chance based on what your spirit was positioned to do. And what you were positioned to do, you had already done. So we're just walking out our destiny. So when it comes to narcissism, you are a beautiful person. And you are born with these individuals coming at you because you're so special. So God allows you, because you in the spirit realm before coming here maybe had chose him very much, and his character very much, meaning walking in the 9 fruits of the Spirit. Now, when you come here, you still have to believe in Christ and get salvation. That's part of your destiny. You know, you could still be an amazing, lovable empath that's abused and used and not find the Lord, and, you know, still go through the damnation process in the end. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying out of that conglomerate of empaths, God thinks very highly of them, in my humble opinion. But they have to be placed in positions where, because they walk in those gifts and those fruits like they do, they have to be tested on another level. So they have to go through these situations to where they're placed under different boundaries that are even heavier, because the closer you are to the Lord, the more that somebody's going to try to put you down, and that's just the way it is. So you're born into this realm, and it's not like the heavenlies where it's uncorruptible, but it's corruptible here, and you're trying to seek out a place to live in the future that's uncorruptible. So the enemy has to beat you down the most and try to convince you that you're nobody and nothing, and that your gifts and your fruits are not worthy in this world system, that they don't work. But once you get past the illusion and you break that curse, then he will, that's an amazing feat for you to get to and get through, but it never ends. There's always a next step. The next higher level to that, you will get the narcissist and people from your past trying to come back. And because you love and you care and you cherish certain moments, you may allow your past to corrupt your future. So I'm here to tell you a deep message, and that is, don't allow any people that were not worthy in your past, after you get to this point, to be worthy to have a place in your life now, because they're only there to entrap you, to ensnare you from reaching your next level with the Almighty. Because in my humble opinion, you can be saved and you can know you're going to heaven when you leave this place, even if you get to that level with the Lord, which is great and it's amazing, and we all need that. But the Lord has also called us to do greater things. Just like the landowner, he gave them, the 3 people, talents, and he wanted them to take those talents and invest them very much into this earth, into these people, into these communities, to help individuals in a godly way, to make things abundant in God's kingdom. And one buried his talent. And that could be the narcissist. It could really be a lot of different people. But God really is very angry when you have talents and you bury them, because he didn't give you them to bury them. He gave you them to invest and to double up. And for you to do that, you have to understand the traps, the ensnarements. You have to understand when you get people that come at you like thirst traps and financial contracts, consents, and covenants, and try to take your talents or control your talents and control your destiny. When you allow those things, you fall subject to it because you consented to it under covenant, contract, and consent, and you allowed people to get back in. You dropped your boundaries. Don't ever let people that were evil in your past come back in to sabotage your future, because you want to continue to increase your talents for the kingdom of God here on this earth. Because when you leave and get to the heavenlies, that will also determine possibly your position of power for all eternity in the heavenlies. This is your test. Now, what you gonna do? Don't allow people from your past that have proven themselves to be your sworn enemy back into your vision and to control your destiny and destroy your future. They will get life insurance policies out on you and PPP loans and all kinds of stuff to wreck you before you even get there with a future fake y'all, waving that wand like the enemy did for the fallen hosts, a witch's wand called Hollywood. Thank you for watching. Till next time, Soul Chat. Peace be out.